There were 3 conversations and interesting things that have happened recently that really pushed me to make this video, which was, first, I had a conversation with an individual coming from California who was asking, can I withstand and understand the winters in Colorado? What are the winters like? I know I can't live in Breckenridge, but can I live in Fort Collins, Boulder, Colorado Springs? We'll find out. And then from there was a recent article in the Coloradoan that actually said that Washington County was the #1 county in all of the United States for number of tornadoes. Now, there's a big asterisk on that because in 2023, there was 35 tornadoes that touched down in one single day. And the time span they looked at was between 2020 and 2024. But hey, you know, weather in Colorado is crazy. So we've got to talk about that. And then finally, there was a top best places to live in the United States, where in 2020 through 2024, there was always a place in Colorado on that top 10 list, whether that be Denver or Boulder or Colorado Springs or Fort Collins. And in fact, in 2020, we were on 4 of the top 10 places with all 4 of those cities. And recently, with the article just coming out on May 20th, the top ranked Colorado city was 150. So I was like, what is the deal? And ultimately, we did dive deep into that and kind of understood maybe why that might be the case, specifically on the updated top list. But that is what we are talking today, folks, is weather, winter, and wildfires in Colorado. Is Colorado all hype? I don't know. My name is Patrick Soukup. This is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel where you come to learn everything there is to know about Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, and Colorado. Now, if you're considering buying, selling, or relocating to the area, give my team and I a call, text, or email, or scan the QR code because about 45 to 50% of you are watching on TV. So hopefully that makes it easy. We would love to be an asset on your team if you are considering relocating, as we've helped hundreds of families move to the area and have really dialed in our systems and would love to be a benefit to you. Now, without any further delay, let's jump into today's video, weather, winter, and wildfires in Colorado. Let's go. Let's just start with one of my favorite things about the weather in Colorado is that we have 4 distinct seasons, and it really does provide some kind of shift, which maybe your wardrobe has to be a little bit larger. You're not going to be able to wear sandals or flip-flops year round. Well, some people would argue that. But overall, you are going to have 4 distinct seasons, my favorite being fall. We'll talk a lot about winter here shortly. You know, during the spring and summer, you're going to get a little bit more precipitation. Summer is going to get dry and arid, really anywhere you are, whether that be on the western slope, eastern plains. We're going to see the majority of our precipitation really between end of March to beginning of June, and then it really kind of leveling off from there, not including our snow. My favorite season, though, is fall. You've got the Palisade Peaches, where you can have pretty dramatic shifts in temperature across Colorado, where in Denver actually had the largest recorded drop in temperature from 46 degrees to -20 degrees, a 66-degree difference in just about 20 minutes. So you can absolutely see weather patterns change in Colorado, and that can be for the negative, going cold, or positive, where it might be snowing in the morning and super sunny and all the snow is melted in the afternoon. So our dramatic weather changes can also help our fruits down in Palisade and our Palisade Peaches, where those night shifts from hot in the afternoon to cold in the evening help those sugars really come out. Now, you are going to have different weather patterns on the eastern plains, a little bit more windy, not as many trees. You are going to have a little bit more severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, as I spoke about earlier. If you're going to have tornadoes in Colorado now, the highest tornado of record was 11,900 feet near Fort Play in Colorado, and that is very unique. That does not happen very often or rarely. And in my life, actually, living in the foothills, the closest tornado was in Windsor in 2008. And in my 36 years, that's the closest and only tornado that I've seen in northern Colorado. Now, that's not to say that there are, or I should say Larimer County. That's not to say that as you get out to the eastern plains, you're not going to see tornadoes on an annual basis. You're also going to see larger hailstorms. That is a weather event in Colorado that most people aren't thrilled about. And between that hail and wildfires, our insurance premiums have seen an increase, and we're trying to mitigate that by way of fire prevention and class 4 impact resistant shingles so that our insurance premiums can kind of level off. We aren't necessarily the California where insurers are leaving the area, but you do have areas like up in Red Feather where my cabin is, where insurance is a little bit harder to get due to the potential wildfire issue. Now, one thing to take note about the weather in Colorado is really the dramatic differences in elevation. For every about 1,000 feet in elevation, you're gonna see about a 3 to 5 degree difference. And I've seen that as we've been driving up to our cabin where maybe we're leaving and it's 85 degrees and I'm like, holy cow, it's gonna be so hot because we don't have AC at our cabin, which I hate. But I'm like, hopefully it gets lower. And by the time we get to the cabin, it's about 80 degrees. I'm like, it's not that much better. It's a little bit better, but that's where we have pretty dramatic weather pattern change shifts between the high country, Breckenridge and Vail, western slope. You got the Front Range in Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, and Denver, and then you have the eastern plains as well. The one thing that I love here, and I would say my wife gives me a lot of crap, is that there's not a ton of humidity. It is very dry. So one thing that you're gonna wanna have is a lot of chapstick, a lot of lotion. I don't know if it's me because I'm born and raised here, but I never put on lotion and I have generally pretty soft skin, but if my wife doesn't put on lotion, she starts to dry out, and it's something that where a lot of people do, and some people literally have chapstick that they're putting on quite a bit because between our elevation gain, our 300 days of sun, and our dry arid climate of only about 50 degrees humidity on average throughout, Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, Denver, we are a dry arid climate, so that is definitely something to take into consideration. Now, one of the questions that prompted this video was, what are our winters like in Colorado? And my comment to him is, well, yeah, I would say Breckenridge is absolutely gonna have a lot more snow and a longer winter season than kind of the Front Range, or definitely, Eastern Plains as well. But that being said, I do get tired of winters come about mid-January to February. I'm over it. I think that's a great time if you're gonna be snowbirding or taking vacations. Go to the beach, get a little reprieve, because, well, the holidays really make the fall into winter time period very enjoyable, exciting, especially if we've got kids. We go take them down to see the holiday lights. We go down and see, Santa Claus's workshop, and there's lots of different activities across Colorado. And if you're a big skier, then absolutely, there is great opportunities to ski, snowboard, sled, snowshoe. I did an entire series about things to do in northern Colorado during the winter, but come end of January into February, I'm just over it. I'm ready for spring, I'm ready for sun, I'm ready for 60, 70 degree days, and those are right around the corner, but we can have very early snowstorms. The earliest of record in Colorado is September 3rd in Denver. In Fort Collins, it's September 8th. And the latest of record is June 12th in Denver. While the rule of thumb is to not plant your garden or your flowers until after Mother's Day, you can have that Colorado weather where wait 5 minutes and it can shift on you. And that being said, you can have a late season snowstorm, which does put a little bit of a damper because fall is my all-time favorite season. And when September 8th, 2020 happened and we had this really early snowstorm, I was like, no, not yet. But fortunately, about 3 to 4 days later, we were back up to the 60s and 70 degree days. Our best piece of infrastructure I've talked about in other videos for the snow and winters is our sun. We have about, close to 300 days of sun a year. So you could get a snowstorm in the morning, but in the afternoon, the sidewalks and streets are basically clear because that wonderful thing called the sun. Additionally, you're not gonna have the dark gray seasons like you might have kind of in the Midwest or Northwest where maybe you don't see the sun as often. The beautiful thing is we could have a negative 10 degree day, which we do get in Colorado. We could have a negative 10 degree day, but the sun is out and it does make it a little bit more acceptable, I guess you'd say. We can get our polar vortexes here in Colorado where about 2 to 3 days in a row, you're gonna see negative 10 to 0 to 5 degrees and not really exceed that. And that's something that are never fun. It doesn't happen as often. It's not like an annual basis, but probably once every other year, once every 2 years, you can get these polar vortexes that roll through and essentially just sit on top of Fort Collins or Denver, Colorado Springs, and just are frozen for about 3 days. The one piece of advice is to make sure that you start your car every 24 hours because the battery can definitely die. And the last thing you want is to go out to your car, needing to go somewhere, you haven't started it for a couple of days during this polar vortex, and it just doesn't even turn over. So one thing that is super important. And one other piece of advice is people have asked during winters in Colorado, do you need to have 4-wheel drive? I have 4-wheel drive, my wife has all-wheel drive, and our van actually just has front-wheel drive. And all 3 vehicles are actually pretty safe. I would say it is a tiered system. Front-wheel drive is a bare minimum. Do not have rear-wheel drive in Colorado. Just don't. I mean, unless you're only gonna drive during the summers, which is totally fine. Then you're gonna have all-wheel drive, and of course, kind of the thing that you're really gonna wanna have, especially if you're up in the high country, is four-wheel drive. Now, one thing that we are moving into is the wildfire season in Colorado, across the United States, and Canada, where yes, we are gonna be seeing drier, arid climates where unfortunately about 84% of fires are caused by humans, whether that be fireworks, cigarettes, barbecues, accidents, arson, you name it. About 84% of fires that are caused by humans, and only about 16% then from lightning or other events that do cause, a natural fire. That being said, Colorado sees about 215,000 acres a year burned on average over the last decade. And in my lifetime, I can remember two specific years, 2013 and 2020 into 2021, where we saw some pretty bad fires and smoke. Now, that's not to say that if the fire isn't in Colorado, we're not gonna get impacted from surrounding areas like Montana, Oregon, California, or Canada, when they have their humongous fires and the smoke kind of comes down this like alleyway of climates. There are gonna be some days that are gonna be air quality advisory, whether that be for people with sensitivities or just in general, the entire population. Very few of those, only about 3 to 6 on an average annual basis. But you are gonna have sensitive groups, probably between 20 to 40 days a year, where the air quality outside is not great for groups that are sensitive to that. So I will say there are a lot of things that are happening in Colorado, across the United States, that are trying to mitigate fires. There's an article that was talking about how NASA is trying to use their technology to see how and where we should thin out forests to mitigate the risk of fires. And we have National Forest Services, park rangers, and forestry services that are trying to thin out areas and make prescribed burns so that if and when we have a wildfire, we at least can mitigate it to a certain degree. Now, wildfires are mostly gonna happen up in the high country, or there are some grass fires that happen on the eastern plains. With the winds, they can be fast moving. Otherwise, you are gonna see most of them up in the high country where there's a lot of firewood, timber, pine, that can go up and smoke and fire. Not a ton of structures, though, generally get impacted. There was the Marshall Fire in Boulder, which happened, in January. It was cold, very dry, heavy winds, and knocking down a power line to where started in about over 1,000 structures were burned with that fire. Now, I've never seen anything like that in my life. Fortunately, Fort Collins has all of their utility lines undergrounded, so we don't necessarily have that big of an issue or concern about that, but that doesn't mean that something else couldn't happen. So wildfires are never something fun to talk about, but they are real. They are something that you're gonna see smoke on an annual basis because the rest of the country or Northern America has a fire somewhere that does see the smoke travel across the United States. But hopefully between education, this video, technology and science, NASA, forestry services, we can start to mitigate some of these fires and maybe become a little bit smarter, and then hopefully fewer human-caused fires for an overall safer and more enjoyable experience during our mid to late summers. So there you have it, folks. We've got some weather, we've got some winter, we do got some wildfires here in Colorado. Is it all hype? I guess I'll leave that up to you, but if you have any specific questions about what it's like living here or around the different areas, I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to comment below, or if you're considering relocating to the area, give my team and I a call, text, or email, and we would love to be an asset on your team. Take care.